You are listening to Party Nerds Weekly.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Party Nerds Podcast.
Woo!
Third here. I got some of the crew with me tonight. Great conversation we're going to have. We're going to get into some good stuff tonight. We got my man Jorge on the board as always. What's up, man? How's things going, Jorge?
We getting some sleep. Now that the baby's sleeping through the night, you know, so I Bravo, don't worry. That day will come.
Oh no, my kid's good. He sleeps 6 hours every night.
Oh, it's good. Good.
All right. And then we got my man Bravo, the Magnificent. What's up, man?
What's up, man? Ready to argue.
Ready to argue.
Maybe
Right.
specifically with you.
Ready.
Yeah, I see. Tonight's topic: have live comic book adaptions become too silly and child-friendly? So, I mean, that automatically that brings to mind Shazam.
Oh,
you know, that movie, Shazam. And I can remember we went to the Shazam premiere. It was me, Bravo, and Nikki. And I was like, this movie's going to be trash. I think we were all just trashing it before we saw this movie, how bad this movie was going to be, the fake muscles on the costume. It was silly and goofy and all that stuff. And even though Shazam is a child in a man's body, but we just wanted more because we're so used to seeing other movies that were so serious. I remember leaving that movie with my mouth on the floor, looking at Bravo and Nikki like, yo, was that movie a good movie? And we were like, yeah, that movie was good. So it just caught me off guard that it could be so silly, but still good. So, I mean, there's an example of something that's childlike, but I think it fits the character too. Certain movies have to fit the character to be silly or not. Bravo. What do you think, man?
I mean, I think Shazam was actually a great example to bring up. It's, you know, especially lately. I mean, Marvel's always been a little guilty of it exponentially, but, you know, I've seen them dip deeper into the humor, and especially the bathos humor, where it's just really serious moment undercut by something goofy, to the point where a lot of times they're missing the mark. And, you know, I think Shazam was a good example of you can be really goofy, have the character goofy, but still when it comes to the stakes, amp it up, make it serious, but still have that levity of humor, especially when they're pointing out tropes, like when he was sitting, like when they're up in the air and the villain's monologuing and he goes, what? I can't hear it. All the way over there monologuing. But I've definitely noticed a pattern that's been increasing over the years.
Now, Marvel has always been, like you said, a little more lighthearted. I think that was one of the big distinctions. DC, of course, because of Zack Snyder, going the dark route, the more serious tone. And that's cool and all, you know, but I think that threw some people for a loop too, because Superman has always been this light, bright, you know, truth, justice, the American way character. To see Superman and Man of Steel struggling with being a hero, not wanting to be the hero, wanting to save his father, but his father's stopping him from saving himself, you know, like all those type of things. I really did enjoy that different look at Superman to get an idea of how hard it is for him to get to that point he was trying to get to. And then to have to kill Zod, it's like you have to make a choice at this moment, you know, killing somebody that's from your planet, you know, it's just you guys against saving a human, and he chose to save the human by breaking his neck. Like, that's deep. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would say like the overly dark tone for me didn't quite resonate with Superman. However, I did enjoy the movie, and I think that it would have been good to see like a true trilogy of that, where, you know, at the very beginning, we do see that he wasn't, you know, the happy-go-lucky person and bringing out the best in people, because he didn't have a choice. He knew Zod wouldn't stop. He didn't have a Phantom Zone at that point, or a way to really stop him. There was no way to contain Zod. And he knew Zod wasn't going to stop. He was just going to keep killing, but one of the big messages of Superman has always been, well, if I killed this criminal, that's the best that they'll ever be. I would rather save them and give them a chance to better themselves because he believes in the best of humanity. But again, I think had we seen a whole trilogy where like that was like the arc of how he gets to that, I think that would have elevated the movie itself. But with the overly dark tones, there can be problems with that too. Like when everything's so serious, it's kind of hard to, resonate with it, because at the end of the day, we're supposed to be seeing ourselves, either our flaws, our best selves, who we want to be in these modern mythos of superheroes. And Superman is supposed to be the speciality of that. And that's why so many people usually resonate with him. And it's, it's not the deep, dark brooding of Bruce Wayne that goes in with Superman. It's kind of that give and take and that ebb and flow of the both of them.
Well,
And some characters are, again, Jorge.
No, I'm just wondering, like, don't you feel bad for the writers who have to come up with this? Like, they're going with source from like the 1940s. They got that campy suit, and then of course I assume that the comics were somewhat campy.
I mean, I feel bad for them because as any writer, you're never going to please everybody. And on top of it, it's not just the 1940s stuff that they have to go over. It's 1940s to now, because there's people that say that's not Batman. Batman was best when he was in the 1970s, or no, that's not Superman. The best run that he did was blah blah blah. Like it's there's been so many different interpretations of the characters that it's hard to realistically say this is who the character is. I mean, right now, even think of the current Spider-Man run. People are going absolutely ballistic because they just keep kicking Peter Parker down. And they were saying like, oh, well, like he doesn't really resonate with people unless he's struggling. And it's, that's a little bit of Spider-Man, but they're taking it to an extreme where like just nothing is working for him. But meanwhile, you look at in the Spider-Verse, Peter B. Parker, he was a fat, overweight, cynical Spider-Man who, he decided after working with Miles, you know what? I am going to get my life around. We've already seen with the trailer for the new one where he got back together with MJ and he has a kid. And everybody is like, without even seeing it, they're like, oh my God, that's great. So good for Peter, like blah, blah, blah. Because, at a certain point, we resonate with these characters to the point where we do want them to win. We want them to succeed. We want them to be happy, because it's not just the struggle that we want to see. We want to see them overcome that struggle.
But some characters shouldn't be happy-go-lucky or in that life. Or is it like the Punisher? That's a character that's a dark character. He murders people.
And he's got a lot of demons in him.
Yeah, so you it's hard to lighten that character up. And I think that's where I think some people with Daredevil from the Netflix series jumping over to She-Hulk. You're saying it's the same character, but now this character is in a different world where he's got to be a little bit lighter and not as dark as his former character self from the Netflix series. So there's that merge. You have to merge it. Did you feel that came off well when they merged that?
I don't, and I feel that's a little bit of the Disney branding starting to finally bleed a little more into the Marvel MCU. With the main topic of what we were going with are things becoming a little too child friendly or child oriented? The thing that always sticks with me when people say that type of stuff is the stories that stick with kids the most aren't always necessarily the ones that they fully comprehend, but there are so many stories where it's, oh my God, this was so good because they tackled real adult moments in it, in a kid's show. Every time, like Avatar, Animorphs, Owl House. Anytime a kid's show comes out, but they really talk about super adult topics, but not dumbing it down for the kids. Like Avatar dealt with genocide. They dealt with, survivors of war and how it affects people who have been ravaged by war. How nationalism can occur, all these things. But at the end of the day, it was a kid's show. But it's heralded as one of the best animated shows ever. I remember when Adventure Time came out, that was something, it was super goofy. The animation looks super goofy. Then you find out it's a post-apocalyptic world. Then you find out the really goofy villain, the reason why he acts so goofy and insane is because he literally lost his mind because after the apocalypse happened, he had to sacrifice himself. He had to sacrifice his brain to get power so he could protect a little girl. And then it starts to become where it's like, oh, holy shit. The kids can recognize it, and it's not throwing like things that are way beyond kids levels. Like it's not throwing in rape or anything like that, but they're showcasing it so that kids can understand these things. Again, one of the things I brought up was Animorphs. Animorph was a very popular book series that talked about a war going on, and it also covered genocide. It covered how both sides of a war, there's no real good and evil, how sometimes some people fighting who seem evil, they're really just trying to survive, and it just goes against your ideals. It doesn't also mean that you can let them get away with it. Right. But when those adult topics are thrown into kids' media, they usually work pretty well as long as they, remember who their true audience is. But adults and kids love both of that stuff. And I feel when you make things like Punisher or even Batman or, any of those things way too jokey and kiddie and everything like that, they lose a good portion of what really makes a story and to show those themes to people in ways that will make them think, especially with, a lot of people talk about how, one of the hot topics is woke culture and everything like that. And the reason why a lot of times it doesn't resonate with people is because it's beating you over the head with it and it's not presenting it in a good way. People will say things like, this show is super political. Okay, what was your favorite show? And then they'll talk about a super political show, but they didn't think of it that way because it was presented to them in a way that actually made them think, not so much about the specific eating them over the head wise. Yeah,
but even with Daredevil, it's like it fit for She-Hulk. Daredevil doesn't have to be such. He's a dark character in this way, but it fit for She-Hulk to me. It was a little bit lighter. It wasn't overly goofy or anything. Look, Daredevil's a fuckboy. We all know that, and that's what he was doing. He was doing his fuckboy thing. So that wasn't out of the realm of being with the character to me. It just, he can go from different levels like that, from something hardcore, which is great to see him hardcore, but then he can be something lighter too.
So long as it makes sense with the character, I can agree with that. Like, if a character is only acting that way to progress the plot, then it's always going to be a problem. However, if it's something where you're like, oh yeah, I could totally see Matt Murdock doing that, then yeah, then it's fine.
All right, we got a question from Cindy. Cindy says, don't you think, though, that the writers also have to try and cater to people who maybe aren't as familiar with the comic storylines?
So, yeah, I definitely agree with this. Especially, going off my previous point of it's impossible to please everybody. But one of the bigger things about the movies, and I remember when the movies first started coming out, one of our very early podcasts, we talked about this, how, now all of the people who used to make fun of the nerds now are getting into it. And some of us liked it and some of us didn't. I was one of the people that liked it because it gave me more people to talk about it with. And it showed these cool stories to people who might not get into them. So yeah, I do agree that, the writers have to cater to the grander audience. But I mean, I also feel that a lot of art is usually lost in trying to make that bottom dollar and trying to cater to everyone. And the problem is when you try to please everybody, you're going to please no one.
Right.
And there's also a saying of just because it's popular doesn't make it good. What's the most popular restaurant on the planet? It's McDonald's. Not everybody wants a McDonald's restaurant though. And I feel that way with movies too.
Yeah, but even that, I think it's got to be a type of balance. Yeah, you want to cater to people who don't, or who aren't familiar with the subject matter, but you got to cater to the people that are faithful to the subject matter too. And I guess that's where the Easter eggs come in and all that type of stuff for the faithful. But you can tell the story because you have to. At the end of the line, at the end of the day, it's all about the money. Like
Right.
you said, you got to make money on these films, so you have to bring in a wider audience. The people who aren't familiar with it, you want them to be your repeat customers. Those are the ones who are going to drive those sales because they are greater than the faithful ones to the source material. So that's a smaller percentage. So it's got to be that type of balance for sure.
Right. Especially too, because like I said, even comic book nerds can't really agree with how a character really is. You can talk, you could go to Comic-Con and say, what do you like about Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man, or what do you like about Captain America? And you'll get 9 different answers, and some of them will be completely contradictory to each other. Because we're talking about something that's been, like, these have been around since 1920, some of them.
So how is a writer going to make everybody happy? What is the perfect solution?
There isn't one. He can't. Like Bravo said, you're not going to make everybody happy. So you're the best option is just to. I think at the end of the day, you still got to stay. You have to stay faithful to the character.
Who do they stay faithful to? The comic book heads, the new viewers. What do you think they have an angle?
So I mean, to me, I think it's taking the parts of the character that stick true with them all the time. Like anytime you create a show, or especially a show, they'll usually have something called a Bible, and it will have all these rules in it where it's like, hey, this character can't age. This character absolutely hates broccoli. It's part of their shtick. This character cannot be happy. This character cannot laugh on screen. This character can't use the left side of his face. But there's usually reasons for it. And I feel that Feige's done a decent job, like a very decent job with that with the MCU, of sticking towards consistency with the characters. With the exception of Thor, he's definitely undergone the most changes, and a little bit Hulk as well. But you need to figure out the things that really, really draw people in. And just like Cindy pointed out, ways that are going to get new people involved in that for what they're going to like. You have people that will still to this day say that Spider-Man 2 from the Sam Raimi run is the best Superman movie of all time. And like, we're talking now, we've gone from where that was one of like 5 superhero movies to now like 200, and there's a reason for it. It spoke good with both of the main antagonist and the protagonist. It was very true to how Spider-Man would be. It presented a story that the comic book heads would be familiar with the Spider-Man No More, and gave it a little bit more of a new light. And it really stuck with the true message of Spider-Man of with great power comes great responsibility. And there's a reason why still to this day it's considered one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Right. So there was a comment from Eddie saying that he feels that the comic book movies have a little too much jokey jokes, but if used sparingly, it's okay. But you know what?
I agree.
Listen, these movies have to have some type of levity in it, without a doubt. If not, it's a hardcore movie, and that's a different demographic you're trying to reach. The jokey jokes pulls in, I think, your non-comic book readers, people who aren't familiar with the source material, things like that. And again, if you're targeting kids, it's you have to have those things in it, I think, for kids.
Oh, you have PG, to, the boys.
Yeah, PG-13. I mean, they can't even go see these movies unless they have an adult with them, even though they probably can anyway. Yeah, but you have these ratings for a reason. The ratings are there for a reason.
Yeah, but like I said, there's still ways that you can present really good stories and show those adult tones and still have a little bit of humor while appealing to kids and adults alike. Actually, I'm going to go with an even better example. The Batman the Animated Series. The one where Mark Hamill first came out as voicing the Joker. That series is so good that it changed a lot of how characters are presented in Batman forever. In fact, it introduced Mr. Freeze's backstory. It introduced Harley Quinn. It introduced, but when you watch this now as an adult, you know, you definitely I loved it as a kid. There wasn't a single, I was like, yeah, Batman fighting. Yeah, this is cool. That's a great villain. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, if I watch one of those episodes, I go, oh my God, each one of these villains is representing a different mental disorder. And they are really, really digging in on how much this fucked them up.
Yeah, well, to me, that show was made for adults, but kids could also watch it. It was made for adults, but kids can watch it. We got a comment from Charnel saying, be honest, y'all, Walt Disney, will they do Daredevil justice or will they Disney-fy the Netflix shows? I mean, I think the Netflix shows are done. They're not doing anything like that. If you mean, will the characters be more Disney, like Daredevil being on She-Hulk? Yeah. Like you said, Bravo said earlier, this is the Disney machine right now. You know, Disney has a bottom line to make, and they want these characters involved. These characters are going to be, you know, Daredevil light. You know what I mean? And the Punisher light, or, you know, things like that. It's just the way it's going to go down.
I haven't seen a Disney Plus show that makes me feel the same way that the Netflix ones did. I definitely enjoyed plenty of the Disney Plus shows, but there were, I don't want to say better writing because it's not that it's not just as clean and simple as that, but there were definitely deeper tones. There was a lot more understanding. But then again, too, also Netflix came out with fucking the terrible version of Iron Fist. So you know what? Like, nobody's
listen, but there's a difference when you can have cursing, sex, all these things in your show. That makes the tones. Yes, there you go. That makes the tones a little bit darker too. Like if you're not seeing that on the Disney lighter side, yeah, it's definitely different. Like Daredevil smashing and taking a walk of shame is different because all we see is Daredevil going to the room, the door closed, then a walk of shame the next day. Where we saw Luke Cage blowing Jessica's back out in that motherfucker, breaking the bed, everything. It's a big difference, man. So yes, we got to understand that. If it's going to be Disney, it's got to be a little bit lighter. But I got to say, that's one of the things that I was hype about with Netflix and really appreciated about the Netflix shows was it could be a little bit more raw like that. And I think it set it apart. And those shows, as you see, I think are really loved.
Yeah. And, it is said that at the end of the day, or let's not forget that at the end of the day, they were still Disney property at that time. So Disney executives signed off and said, yeah, it's okay. You can present our character like this. We're fine with that.
Yeah. And so other shows, that like we talked about Shazam, what other movie do you think has crossed that line and has gotten with the character a little too silly where the character shouldn't be silly?
Thor. Yeah. Explain, please.
They took
Jorge's pissed about this.
They did the same problem that Spider-Man 3 had, where they tried to throw in way too many storylines in one. And I think they still could have pulled off what they were doing. It just wasn't handled correctly. But at the end of the day, you have Gore, who they gave a very different interpretation than the comics.
Right.
But I still liked how Christian Bale played the character.
Great actor.
Although I did feel that it was, and somebody pointed this out, and I kind of agree, that it was more almost like he was playing Heath Ledger's Joker. But at the end of the day, you have somebody, he just kidnapped a bunch of children who he showed he was ready to kill, and he had no problem killing, but he didn't kill them. And like Thor became way too goofy. You know, he's always been a little goofy, and like they've gotten it progressively goofier. And you know, Thor Ragnarok, he was at right before this one came out, or excuse me, not Ragnarok. Ragnarok. He was at his goofiest. I believe he was at his goofiest, but it still worked, especially with how everything was presented. And you know, it gave a nice counterbalance, as Jorge said before, where Hela was super serious. She's the goddess of death. She's killing all of his people. And he's not sitting there laughing about it, but, you know, he's making jokes here and there. And there was plenty of jokes in there, but it still ran well. Meanwhile, in Love and Thunder, oh, go ahead.
So Thor 1, that was Thor. Serious. Thor 2, he was still serious. Thor 3, then it progressed from Thor being that serious Thor character and sliding down the scale.
When he joined the Avengers,
Go ahead, Jorge.
Sorry. When he joined the Avengers, what did you think? He started getting a little.
I think Avengers with the whole joke with, you know, they're talking about Loki. He murdered a bunch of people and he killed his people. And Thor's like, he's my stepbrother. You know, it's that quick joke, but it was funny. It was well timed, but you can see now, here we go. We're sliding down that jokey slope for these characters.
I feel also the difference in humor. In Thor 1 and Avengers, he was funny because of how blunt he was and how he was almost outside of our normal culture or what we would expect because he was from a different culture.
He's a god. We're puny humans to him, yes.
But it made sense for his character. But as it went on, it went from that to haha funny jock bro moment. Like, I still laughed when they did this, but it did make me realize that they put this joke in there to make me laugh, and it took me out of the experience. When he's talking about, oh, well, what if you in Thor Ragnarok, won't they recognize you? Not if I do this and cover my face. Like, it made me laugh, but it made me very aware that a writer came up with that joke, put it somewhere where it would make sense, and it took me way out of watching the movie. Like, I was very aware again that I was watching a movie rather than enjoying the experience and the story.
Right. Now, Darnell said Thor Love and Thunder was super goofy. Ragnarok was much more balanced. And I agree. The jokes in Ragnarok, I could see they were going the jokey route with this movie. But it was still, to me, a good, entertaining movie where Thor Love and Thunder was, to me, it was a shit show. Like, that movie, I was pissed when I left that movie. Like, yo, what the fuck did I just watch? You know, it was, the jokes were forced to me. They were forcing jokes down my throat. And it was just too much. For me, it was too much.
It was also not balanced because I felt like, for example, Gore, when he has a hold of all of them. And he does, like, first off, the scene is amazing. Christian Bale, amazing job with the character when he's taunting Valkyrie. And he goes from really dark and like broody to making fun of how all of her family died. And he's taunting her about it. And then when she's just looking at him and he knows he got her, but she's not saying anything, he goes, good chat, and takes her away. That, I was like, oh my God, that made me like really feel, that was a full character moment. Like, that was great. And it was still a little funny because of how he was behaving. It was just funny in a different way. But then you have Thor just being like, haha, I'm so dumb. And
Yeah, Thor seems to have gotten dumber as these movies have gone along.
right.
You know, to me, and it's funny to see him with Star-Lord. He got on Star-Lord level of stupidity.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, the biggest, like, yo, you're not Star-Lord stupid, bro. Like,
Right.
you're not. But he
Like,
dropped down to that level.
Take even a joke he did in Endgame when he finally arrives right before Thanos' army comes to Wakanda, and he says to Captain America, "Oh, I see you copying my beard. That's funny. That's hysterical. That's character. Like, that really felt like it was like, okay, cool, Thor. But then, like, you compare that to how he was in Love and Thunder, where he's, or like any of the later movies, and he's making these jokes where he's like, where Star-Lord's like looking at his crew, and you just see Thor going,
yeah, I'm telling
again,
you.
it was funny. Like, it made me laugh, but it just took me out of the experience.
So another character, Eddie brought up how Bucky Winter Soldier, he was super serious when he came out in the second Cap movie, and now he's sliding down that scale, the not serious slide he's taking.
Yeah.
And
oh God.
yeah, no.
I was gonna say, yeah, because they forced him to be buddy cop with Falcon, and like they forced his character to fit into a trope, but that's not who the character was that was presented to us. Even if you want to say like, oh well, he became more free and obvious, cool, but we've seen how Bucky was before he was the Winter Soldier, and yeah, he made fun of his friends and stuff like that, but he wasn't dumb. He was a very confident person. He was very, like, to the point. He knew what he was doing, and it wasn't just, oh yeah, he's a competent idiot. It was, yo, this is the guy that is probably going to be making the decisions.
Listen, I'm cool with that, man. That dude's brains is scrambled eggs, man. Come on, man. How did I put that dude through the blender so many times? I'm cool with that character. And
But
to me,
oh God,
it's not as offensive as Thor. You know, Winter Soldier, he's a total badass, hardcore, all that stuff. Look, I enjoyed the little buddy because it's like, yo, it's like Cap's the girlfriend. Like, Cap's my girlfriend. Falcon's like, that's my new girlfriend. Buddy's like, no, that's my girlfriend. And they're fighting over the girl. But it wasn't, to me, too jokey. Like, yo, can you move your seat up? No. Real simple. Like, yo, you could have done that earlier. I hate you. Like, it's subtle. It's quick. It's not a prolonged joke. They're not acting, to me, goofy about it. It's like us joking with each other. Like, yeah, shut the fuck up. Your mama first. But like, whatever we're saying, you know, it's done the right way, I think, with their jokes as opposed to Thor.
I think that those were good examples because, again, they're character moments. They are true to who the character is. You know, like, and that's like the biggest thing. I just think that, you know, we're not going to, like, somebody who goes through that amount of trauma, who's been tortured and knows he was brainwashed and killed people that were innocent that he had no control over. I feel that there's going to be like a little more trauma and not dance around it. And I feel that he'll still make comments like the two jokes that you pointed out. He would still do that because that's who Bucky was.
Right.
But I do agree that Thor is definitely the biggest
offender
problem with it. Yeah. I think another one is definitely Hulk. You know, he's gone to be happy-go-lucky, and, you know, I can understand, hey, you know, he was always angry. He's been working on that, blah, blah, blah. But it's not, we didn't see a character progression and like a journey from Bruce Banner and the Avengers to what we saw, all the way to She-Hulk. Like,
yeah, but that, to me, that's because he doesn't have his own movie. You could
But we
develop
need to
that and show that in a solo movie. When you have to be part of other people's movies, number one, your airtime is limited to begin with. So there's
but
only
that's
so
the thing. It shouldn't be presented as a different character then. If we're using a character, and regardless of, oh, well, this time has passed, or oh, he didn't get his own movie, Well, to the rest of the audience, he's still character A, and now you're presenting him as character B. That, I think, is a big problem because it's not consistent with a character. And then we get people where it's just, oh, yeah, he's super goofy and happy-go-lucky now. Meanwhile, he was talking about how he tried to kill himself, like, in the first movie.
So Haas asked the question about who hasn't become basically super soft, who's not serious anymore in the MCU. I think one character is Cap. I think Cap has pretty much stayed the same through all of his movies. Cap hasn't slid down the slope where he became super jokey, or Cap has always been that serious character, that man out of touch, trying to just be part of the real world now that he's in.
But
I think his character has pretty much stayed that way.
Cap has changed, but we've seen the arc. And I think the way to show that he changed was how they did Infinity War, where he saw his old self, or excuse me, Endgame, where he saw his old self, and how different they were, even to the point where the Steve that we knew is, rolling his eyes at something that past self of him said, because he has grown, he has changed. But I feel that wasn't what we're talking about. He grew, he did change. We saw it change,
and he got stronger because I believe that the more, like you said, Thor and Hulk, the more campy they got, the more their powers got nerfed.
I think also too, like we almost, as time has gone on, you can take all of these jokes and you can say, what character said this? And you're not going to be able to tell unless you've memorized the movies. But if you said, like, oh, is this a joke Thor would say? Is this a joke Hulk would say? Is this a joke Bucky would say? Is this a joke Tony would say? Is this a joke Steve would say? It's starting to blend. And that's a big problem because they're supposed to be very distinct characters. But now instead, the humor has become so homogenized where if a writer presented this to you and was like, okay, this is a new joke I'm working on. Tell me what character you think is going to say it in the next Marvel movie. I think you're going to get a different answer from almost everybody.
So but right to that comment, you don't think that that's a little bit of just being around each other so much? Look, when you're around people, you pick up their traits and characteristics. If you're somebody who maybe doesn't curse a lot, but your group of people curse a lot, you're going to start cursing too. It's just because that's the group of people you're hanging with. So maybe these characters are becoming jokey because Tony starts it off, because Tony always got some shit to say. You know what I mean? And then it trickles down. Vision was never jokey, but he's, a robot, whatever you want to call him. Android. There you go. Synthezoid. So, but, Scarlet Witch has never been jokey. So there's characters still that haven't made that leap, jump the shark into jokey territory. But like you said, I think those character arcs, like you said about Cap, we saw his character arc, come full circle. But to me, he still stayed true to himself through that character arc. He cracked jokes, but he never got too jokey to me. And I think that's one character right there. So we got Haas, something else. I want to say Wanda's still serious as hell, even with WandaVision. When she confronted the authorities, she was menacing and then evolved into one of the best villains in the Doctor Strange sequel. Yeah. Wanda's a great character. I think Wanda's a great character. And they've done well with her. So we'll see what happens when she comes back eventually.
I think that they jumped a little bit from who she was in WandaVision to who she was in Doctor Strange. A little bit, but I don't think that it was necessarily a sin from a difference of if you watch Thor 1 versus Thor Love and Thunder.
And again, she gets a pass to me because her brains were scrambled eggs too. Yo, come on, man. Do you know what trauma does to you? Her brains were scrambled.
I think that they did a decent job of showing us, hey, she's going on this path and now time has changed and she's really used the Darkhold and everything like that. Again, I think it was a little too much of a jump, but I don't think it's as big of a sin because they showed us, hey, she's hitting the ramp and like she's in the air. Like, what trajectory is she really going to go?
Right.
It's kind of obvious she's going to get darker.
And I think a little bit too is people now have become just overly critical. There's never going to be a perfect movie. The most perfect movie you could think of, we could find something wrong with it. We could pick it apart somehow, some way. But it's just people become so critical of everything now that a really good movie gets ripped apart. You know, and again, you're not going to please everybody. Some people, you know, are going to like a movie and more than others. It just comes down to that. Some people are going to want to see Batman always dark, never light. And vice versa. Some people want to see
catch up with their steak. It doesn't mean they're right, but it's what they like.
Exactly. Cindy said, "Is everyone suddenly a writer?" Yeah, seems like that. Dark Darnell. Should X-Men be dark? Right. So should the X-Men be dark?
Bravo.
I think the X-Men can go both ways. It's just, again, I think they can even do a blend and mix because you have so many different characters.
Deadpool, your boy, Bravo, your boy Deadpool's a perfect example of this. Deadpool is a crazy, goofy character that breaks the fourth wall, all that stuff. Deadpool can be in any genre of this, from horror to goofy, because that's his character.
When I first started cosplaying as him, when I was 15, so you're talking 19 years ago, when I first started cosplaying as him, it was because when I started reading up on him, I went, oh man, this character can be goofy. He can be an assassin. He can be really dark. He could be really visceral, but it stayed consistent. It like made sense with how he would go, because you would see one where he's just, hey, I'm just going to run around killing people and I'm going to make light about it. But then there are other ones where he's super dark. Although I will say he changed drastically from when he was first introduced, but most characters have.
Right.
And that's, I think, another thing that is kind of interesting to see is now that we've seen so many itinerations throughout comics, video games, and all that. Now we're starting to see this effect with the movies, now that we're getting 4 different Batman, now that we're getting another Superman. Like, we've had a lot of Supermen, and, you know, they've all had different versions. Some of them have been kind of homogenized, but, you know, Zack Snyder's version is very different than when Christopher Reeve was Superman.
And the thing is, each one will have its own fan base, creating a little subculture.
Yes, there are people that say Jack Nicholson was the best Joker. There are people that say Heath Ledger is the best Joker. There are people that will say Mark Hamill is the best Joker. Then they'll say that the best Joker is in Arkham Asylum or in the video games or in the comic books, and it hasn't been introduced yet. There's different tastes for everybody. There's so many iterations, excuse me. So there can be just so many wild interpretations, and everybody will have different favors.
There we go. So you're thinking that it's going to basically, moving forward, it's going to be a multiverse of things. They can do 4 Batman movies at the same time, and each will have its own fan base, right?
I think they could. And I think that there's definitely going to be ones that are better than others. And I think that there's going to be fan bases that are, just like we said, they're going to be very polarized. This is the best. That is the best. You know, we have Star Wars. There's only one Star Wars anymore now, because now there's Star Wars Legends and the canon version. And the canon is the only one, according to Disney. But you have people that they can't even agree on what was the best of the original trilogy. And then when the prequels came out, then there were people that absolutely hated it. There were people that loved it. It's changed over time, and now people say that the Clone Wars is the best series. People say Mando's the best series. It's, as long as you stay consistent, show me different itinerations, show me different things. I don't care. But when it starts to get tone deaf and like really miss its mark, where you're just trying to fit in every joke, and, you know, the characters are not distinct from each other, or they're saying this joke just because it's funny, but it has nothing. It's not something the character would say. Then I feel it's a problem.
So to wrap this all up, let's get back to the question. Are comic book adaptions too silly and childlike? Jorge.
Oh,
what do you
yeah.
think?
Yes.
You're saying yeah.
All right. The thing is, you know, I don't know. Maybe
Come on, man. Stand on that shit, Jorge. Stand on that shit.
because I read the comics, and then wow, these guys are serious. They mean business. They're cracking skulls. And then I'm watching the movie. They're throwing campy jokes and everything. So I was like, oh man, okay, that's not what I used to read. But again, the writers have to entertain everybody, or maybe they want to entertain the new viewers because they'll get I guess more of a cash grab with merchandise and all that. But can't make everybody happy.
Bravo. Are they too silly and childlike?
I think that they've definitely started to err a little more on the goofy and child side, which is a shame because I feel that you can still appeal to the lowest common denominator. You can still appeal to children while showing really serious subject matter. So I think comic movies haven't hit their true stride yet. I think that they really have a lot more stories to tell. And I think that it's an ever-evolving process. But right now, yeah, I think it's a little too kiddie and jokey.
I say no. Both of y'all fools is wrong. No, they're not too childlike. And they're not freaking good. Come on, man. Y'all need to stop this bullshit, man. For real. Y'all need to stop this bullshit right now. It's not that way. Look, certain ones are like a Shazam. Yeah, but we expect that because we know that's the character, all that stuff. Look, we know the Marvels are probably going to be a little goofy and silly, but you got Ms. Marvel in that, who was goofy and silly in her little, Disney series. So, nah, I don't think they're that way. Look, here's a question. Do you think the next Batman movie is going to be goofy and silly?
I hope not.
No, the answer is no, Bravo. Say fucking no.
I hope not.
He embraces the seriousness. So, no.
I don't think that's going to be goofy and silly and childlike. I think they're going
really
to stay
hope
true
not.
to that.
I hope they stick to their guns. And
Cindy, you got good taste, Cindy. That's why we agree. This is the only time me and Cindy probably ever agree on anything except food, but I'll take it. But again, sorry, Bravo. Go ahead, man.
I hope that they don't. I hope that they stick to their guns and they really dig in with the universe that they've created. It's just we've seen too many times where they had a really dark universe and then DC started getting really jokey.
I think it'll stay the same because Matt Reeves wants to keep it separate from that bigger DC universe.
Fingers crossed.
So if you're going to keep it separate, you can keep everything in your lane. I think this might be the answer for this question for everybody. Maybe DC is finally doing something right by having a Batman that's not connected to the main or having another Batman in the main universe, but another universe where he's not connected to that, and they can do these stories where we can keep them serious. We don't have to be campy and goofy and childlike. That could be the answer to all of this, But then it's, are we okay with having more than one Batman? That'll be the next debate.
DC's been like the Eagles lately, where it's, oh yes, they finally did it. Yes. Oh, they fucked it up.
Come on, it's disrespectful, bro. It's disrespectful. Yo, fellas, it's been a great show tonight. Glad to see y'all again. Yo, we do this every week. So y'all watching live, we appreciate y'all tuning in to us, checking us out. We'll catch y'all next week. We're going to have some other content coming out for y'all too, so be sure to check that out also. Yo, Jorge, let's wrap this up, baby.
Woo!